Chapter 1. Shadows of the King. Antonio Moretti moved through the dimly lit corridors of his office building with the calm precision of a man who had faced death more times than he could count. His tailored suit clung to his broad frame, and his eyes, dark and sharp, scanned every detail with a predator's instinct. Each scar on his face and hands was a story of survival, a reminder of battles fought and allies lost. Despite the fear he commanded, there was a loneliness that no power or money could erase. Elena Rossi was unaware of the world she was about to step into. She hurried down the crowded street, her mind focused on mundane errands and fleeting words. Her laughter echoed softly when a street musician played a familiar tune, and for a moment, the city felt alive with warmth. Then her eyes met his. Antonio had been walking in a straight line through the crowd when a fleeting figure brushed past him. He turned sharply and froze. There was something about her, something fragile yet unafraid, that pulled at a part of him he had long abandoned. Her hair caught the sunlight, soft and golden, and her eyes, wide and curious, seemed to look right through the walls he had built. Neither spoke immediately. The world around them continued its rush, but in that moment, there was a pause, a suspended heartbeat where danger, curiosity, and an unspoken recognition intertwined. Antonio felt an unfamiliar tug in his chest, and Elena felt a shiver she could not explain. As he walked past her, he caught her scent, subtle and sweet, leaving a trace of warmth in the cold air around him. Elena, unaware of the significance of the encounter, glanced back once, and their eyes met again. In that fleeting connection, Antonio realized that not every person he encountered would fear him or flee. Some might see him differently, and the thought was both thrilling and terrifying. By the time they parted ways, neither could shake the memory. Antonio returned to his office with the weight of responsibility pressing on him. Yet a new thought lingered in the quiet of his mind. Elena Rossi had entered his world, and for the first time in years, he wondered if someone could see beyond the scars and the power to the man beneath. Chapter 2. An unexpected encounter. Elena Rossi had barely caught her breath after the brief encounter on the street when the world around her seemed to shift. She was running errands, unaware that fate was quietly aligning her path with Antonio Moretti's. Her bag slipped from her shoulder as she turned a corner, and papers scattered across the pavement like fragile petals in the wind. Antonio, standing a short distance away, noticed the commotion immediately. He was rarely caught off guard, but something compelled him to step forward. In one fluid motion, he bent down, gathering the papers with practiced efficiency, his long fingers brushing against hers when he handed her the last sheet. "Thank you," Elena murmured, her voice barely audible over the noise of the city. Her heart was racing, not just from the stumble, but from the nearness of the man whose presence seemed to command both fear and fascination. Antonio's gaze lingered on her longer than necessary, and he felt a strange warmth in his chest. "Be careful," he said, his voice low, carrying a weight that made her instinctively straighten her posture. There was a calm authority in the way he spoke, a quiet promise that he could protect or destroy with the same ease. Elena hesitated, wanting to ask his name, to say something more, but the words caught in her throat. Something about him demanded caution, yet there was curiosity in her eyes, a spark that neither fear nor respect could extinguish. Antonio noted it immediately. Most people in his world either bowed to his power or avoided him entirely. Elena did neither. She observed, quietly assessing, yet she did not shrink or avert her gaze. There was a rare bravery in her, a fearlessness that intrigued him beyond reason. Their first real conversation began awkwardly, stilted and cautious. He asked if she was okay, and she assured him she was. Her words were simple, but her tone carried a sincerity that struck him more than any flattery he had ever received. In that brief exchange, an unspoken connection formed, delicate and tentative, yet undeniable. When they finally parted ways, both carried a lingering awareness of each other. Elena felt a flutter of anticipation she had never experienced, and Antonio felt a curiosity he could not explain. For the first time, he wondered if someone could exist in his world who might look past the scars and the danger to see the man he truly was beneath. Chapter 3. The first kiss of Danger City never truly slept, and neither did the threats lurking in its shadows. Elena had no idea that walking home that evening would place her directly in the path of danger. A car screeched behind her, tires skidding, and a figure leapt out from the darkness. Blocking her path, panic surged through her veins as she backed away, her mind scrambling for an escape. Antonio had been monitoring a rival faction that had recently shown interest in his territory. His instincts screamed before his mind even processed the situation. He was already there, appearing as if from nowhere, his presence overwhelming. His hand gripped Elena's arm, pulling her behind him with swift precision. "Stay close," he commanded, his voice low and urgent. The way he moved, confident and precise, betrayed years of experience, yet there was an edge of fear for her safety that he refused to show. The assailant lunged, but Antonio's movements were fluid and controlled. Within seconds, the threat was neutralized. Elena's heart pounded, and she pressed against him instinctively, seeking comfort in the only solid presence around her. His body was tense, every muscle ready, yet when he looked down at her, there was an intensity in his gaze that made her breath catch. In that suspended moment, the danger faded, leaving only the two of them standing close in the dim glow of the streetlights. Antonio's hand lingered near hers, and without thinking, he leaned down and pressed his lips to hers in a brief, impulsive kiss. It was protective yet intimate, a collision of fear and desire that neither could ignore. Elena froze at first, her mind struggling to catch up with the rush of emotion. Then a warmth spread through her chest, leaving her heart racing in a way that had nothing to do with fear. Antonio pulled back slightly, his eyes searching hers for any sign of hesitation or regret. "You're safe now," he murmured, though his own voice betrayed the rapid beat of his heart. I think so," she replied, still trembling, not just from the danger, but from the lingering memory of the kiss. Neither spoke again as the tension slowly ebbed, yet the spark between them had been ignited. Something unspoken had passed between them, a fragile connection born in the middle of danger, hinting at feelings that were as unexpected as they were undeniable. As Antonio guided her to a safer path, both of them knew that nothing would ever be the same. The kiss had broken the first barrier, and a new, complicated chapter of their lives had begun. Chapter 4. Scars and Secret's next few days were quiet, but the memory of the street encounter lingered between them like an unspoken promise. Elena found herself thinking about Antonio Moretti more often than she cared to admit. There was something magnetic about him, something that drew her in despite the warnings her mind whispered about his dangerous world. Antonio, on the other hand, was restless. He could not stop replaying the moment of the kiss, the warmth of her presence, the way her eyes had met his without fear. He had spent his life building walls, hiding behind power and reputation. Yet Elena had seen something he had long buried. Her curiosity and kindness were disarming, and he hated how easily she unsettled him. It was Elena who broke the silence first. She had been invited to a charity event that Antonio was attending for business purposes. Nervous, yet determined, she approached him, and for the first time, their conversation moved beyond pleasantries. "You have scars," she said softly, gesturing vaguely toward his hands and jawline. Her voice carried neither judgment nor pity, only quiet curiosity. Antonio's jaw tightened. He had spent years keeping those marks hidden beneath suits and controlled movements. "They are part of who I am," he said, his tone flat but not unkind. Elena tilted her head, studying him with careful eyes. "But they must have stories. You can't carry all that pain without something inside breaking." The words hit deeper than she realized. Antonio looked away, swallowing hard as he recalled the nights filled with violence and betrayal, the friends he had lost, and the innocence he had been forced to shed. Slowly, he began to speak, not in full confession, but in fragments, allowing her glimpses of the man behind the title. There was the night he had been ambushed and left for dead, the time he had trusted the wrong person, the battles that had left not just marks on his body, but on his soul. With each revelation, Eleanor's eyes softened, her hand brushing gently against his arm, in a gesture of quiet support. "You don't have to hide everything," she murmured. "You don't have to carry it alone." For the first time in years, Antonio allowed himself to feel exposed, and it terrified him. Yet there was a strange comfort in her presence, a warmth that chipped away at the armor he had spent a lifetime perfecting. By the end of the evening, the connection between them had deepened. Eleanor understood more of the man he was, the weight he bore, and Antonio realized that she was not just another fleeting encounter. She was a rare light in a world he had always seen in shadows. As they parted, both felt the pull of something undeniable. Scars and secrets had been shared, and in that vulnerability, a fragile trust had begun to bloom. Chapter 5. The heart beneath the armor. Antonio found himself thinking about Eleanor more than he wanted to admit. Her laughter echoed in his mind, a rare sound that seemed to cut through the constant weight of his responsibilities and the darkness that followed him like a shadow. He hated how vulnerable he felt around her, yet he could not resist it. Eleanor, for her part, noticed the small changes in him, the way he lingered longer in conversation, the fleeting warmth in his gaze when she smiled, the way his hand seemed to brush against hers almost accidentally. She knew he was guarded, yet each small gesture hinted at the man beneath the armor. One evening, they met at a quiet cafe, far from the prying eyes of the city. Antonio ordered 2 coffees, his fingers brushing hers briefly as he handed her the cup. She caught the contact, a shiver running down her spine, and smiled softly. "You're careful not to show much, but I can see it," she said, her voice light, teasing yet gentle. Antonio looked at her, a mixture of surprise and curiosity flickering in his eyes. "See what?" he asked, though he already knew she was referring to the tenderness he tried so hard to hide. "The man behind the scars," Eleanor replied. "The one who laughs, who cares, who notices the little things. I see him." His chest tightened. It had been years since anyone had truly seen him, past the reputation, past the power. And here she was, observing, understanding, accepting him without hesitation. He wanted to retreat, to hide, but the warmth in her eyes made it impossible. They walked together through the quiet streets afterward. A cool breeze rustled Eleanor's hair, and Antonio instinctively reached out, tucking a stray strand behind her ear. The gesture was small, almost casual, yet it carried an intimacy neither of them could deny. "You make it hard to stay distant," he admitted, his voice low and rough. Eleanor laughed softly, the sound like music to him. "And you make it hard not to notice," she said, brushing lightly against his arm as they walked. In that moment, Antonio realized that the walls he had built were starting to crumble, not by force, but by the gentle persistence of someone who saw the heart beneath the scars. The thought both thrilled and terrified him. He wanted to protect her, to keep her close, yet he feared the vulnerability she brought out in him. By the time they parted that night, there was a subtle shift in their bond. A trust had begun to deepen, a delicate thread weaving between them, stronger than any of Antonio's carefully constructed defenses. Eleanor had glimpsed the heart beneath the armor, and he found himself silently hoping she would never let go. Chapter 6. Dangerous temptations. City had grown restless, and so had Antonio. A rival faction had made its move, sending subtle warnings that Eleanor's safety was no longer guaranteed. The thought of anyone harming her made his blood boil, yet he forced himself to remain composed. Every instinct screamed for action, but he needed her to trust him. Even as danger loomed, Elena sensed the shift the moment she arrived at his office. The air was charged with tension. A quiet storm, beneath the polished surface of power and control. Antonio's gaze lingered on her longer than usual, his jaw tight. And when he finally spoke, his voice carried an edge of restrained urgency. "You shouldn't be here," he said. Though the words were meaningless next to the raw concern in his eyes. "I'm not afraid," she replied softly. Though a flicker of doubt passed over her, she could feel the danger surrounding them, yet she refused to retreat. Antonio's presence had become a strange comfort, a shield she did not want to leave. The threat arrived abruptly. Shadows moved in the alleys outside, and Antonio's men intercepted a minor attack that could have escalated into something much worse. Elena watched him in action, the lethal precision in his movements leaving her both terrified and mesmerized. When the danger subsided, Antonio turned to her, his eyes dark and intense. He stepped close, reducing the space between them until she could feel the heat radiating from him. "You shouldn't have been here," he murmured again, this time almost as a warning to himself, a confession of how deeply he feared losing her. Before she could respond, he leaned down and kissed her. It was brief at first, protective and desperate, a release of the tension that had built between them. Yet the kiss deepened almost instinctively, their lips moving with a hunger that neither had fully acknowledged until that moment. Elena's hands found his chest, feeling the solid strength beneath the suit, and Antonio's hands framed her face, drawing her closer, as if to erase every fear in the world. They finally broke apart, both gasping slightly, the air thick with heat and unspoken desire. "You need to stay close to me," Antonio said, his voice low, roughened by emotion. "I will," Elena whispered, her heart racing. "I trust you." The night stretched on, a fragile calm settling after the storm. The danger had forced them together in a way words never could, igniting a fire that neither could ignore. Antonio realized that he could no longer hide from his own feelings, and Elena understood that love in his world came wrapped in danger and intensity. For the first time, they both understood that desire and trust could coexist, even in the shadows of violence. The boundaries between protection, passion, and vulnerability had blurred, leaving only a magnetic pull neither could resist. Chapter 7. Vulnerable confessions. City had grown quieter that evening, but the weight of unspoken truths lingered between Antonio and Elena. They were alone in his penthouse, the skyline glittering behind floor-to-ceiling windows, yet the world outside felt distant, insignificant compared to the storm of emotions inside. Antonio sat in his chair, hands clasped, his gaze fixed on a distant point. Elena stood near the sofa, hesitant but determined, sensing that something heavy pressed on him. She had seen glimpses of his vulnerability before, but now there was a depth that begged for acknowledgement, for understanding. "Antonio," she began softly, stepping closer, "you don't have to carry everything alone." He looked at her then, truly looked, as if seeing her for the first time. The mask of the Mafia King, the cold, untouchable exterior, slipped just enough to reveal the man underneath. "I've lost people," he confessed, his voice raw and uneven. "Friends I trusted, family I could never protect. Every scar on my body, it's a memory of someone I failed to save." Eleanor's heart ached at his words. She moved closer, reaching out to place a gentle hand over his. "Those scars aren't just pain," she said softly. "They're proof that you survived, that you fought. They don't make you weak, Antonio. They make you human." He swallowed hard, the first hint of tears threatening his control. "I don't know how to let someone in. I've built walls so high that no one can reach me. I don't want to hurt you because I've hurt too many people already." "You won't hurt me," she whispered, her thumb brushing over the back of his hand. "I want to be here, for you, with you." You don't have to be perfect or untouchable. I just want you. The vulnerability in her eyes, the steady courage in her voice, disarmed him entirely. Antonio felt a pull in his chest, a mixture of fear and longing that was almost unbearable. Slowly, almost hesitantly, he leaned forward, resting his forehead against hers. I've never trusted anyone like this, he admitted. And I'll never let go, Elena said, her lips brushing against his temple in a tender promise. In that quiet room, amidst the glittering city lights and the echoes of past battles, they shared a moment of raw intimacy. The fear and walls and scars that had defined Antonio's life began to soften under Elena's warmth. For the first time, he allowed himself to feel seen, accepted, and even loved. By the time the night ended, something fundamental had shifted. Between them, trust had been built not in grand gestures, but in whispered confessions, gentle touches, and the courage to be vulnerable. Antonio realized that love was not weakness, it was a force strong enough to heal even the deepest wounds, and Elena had become the center of that realization. Chapter 8. Betrayals and 𝐼𝐻𝐸𝐿𝐵𝐻𝐿 they had found together, shattered faster than either of them could have anticipated. A trusted ally within Antonio's organization had turned, feeding information to a rival faction. The betrayal hit him like a punch to the chest. But the hardest blow came when Elena was caught in the crossfire. Antonio had gone to meet the traitor, only to find that his enemies had anticipated every move. Elena had been nearby, visiting him unannounced, and suddenly she was in danger because of his world. Panic surged through him, sharp and burning. He fought with everything he had, eliminating the threat, but not before seeing the fear in her eyes, a fear he could not erase with words alone. Elena was shaken, trembling as she wrapped her arms around herself. Antonio, why didn't you tell me? She whispered, her voice cracking. Why didn't you protect me? I did protect you, he said firmly, his own voice tight with guilt and frustration. But I failed. This world, it's dangerous. And I wanted to keep you away from it. Tears welled in Eleanor's eyes, a mix of fear and frustration. I don't want to be kept away. I want to be with you, even if it's dangerous. I trust you, but this betrayal makes me question everything. Antonio's chest tightened at her words. He had tried to shield her, to create a world where she could feel safe. And instead, he had exposed her to the very danger he had sworn to keep at bay. Guilt and anger called inside him, threatening to consume reason. He reached out, taking her hands in his, desperate for her to understand. I would never hurt you, he said, his voice breaking. Everything I do, every risk I take, it's to protect you. I swear to you, Elena, I will never let anything happen to you. Her eyes softened, the fear still present but tempered by the love that had grown between them. I know, she whispered. I needed to feel that you understand what I'm risking too. The betrayal had tested their bond, exposing vulnerabilities they both feared. Antonio's world was one of shadows, power, and danger, and Eleanor's presence had become a light that could easily be snuffed out. Yet through the heartbreak and fear, their commitment to each other solidified. They were no longer two separate beings cautiously touching each other's lives. They were a unit, intertwined by trust, desire, and a shared resolve to face whatever came next. As they held each other that night, the city around them quieted, but their hearts were loud with determination. Love had survived the first real test, but Antonio knew that more challenges awaited. Every scar, every betrayal, every danger had only deepened his need to protect her, to claim her not just with power, but with the heart he had long kept locked away. Chapter 9. The fight for love. The morning air was thick with tension, a heavy reminder that danger never truly slept in Antonio's world. He had tracked the rival faction to their hideout, his mind a storm of strategy and raw emotion. Eleanor's safety was no longer just a concern, it was a personal mission, a burning necessity that eclipsed every other thought. Elena, unaware of the full scope of the danger, had insisted on staying close. "I'm not leaving your side," she said firmly, her hand gripping his arm. Her resolve, fierce yet tender, made Antonio's chest tighten with both pride and worry. He wanted to shield her from everything, but he also knew she was brave enough to face it with him. The confrontation was swift and brutal. Shadows of the rival faction emerged from the abandoned warehouse, their weapons glinting in the dim light. Antonio moved with lethal precision, every strike calculated, every movement protecting Elena. Yet this time, he did not act alone. Elena followed his lead, her quick thinking and courage saving him from a near-fatal ambush. During a pause in the chaos, Antonio grabbed her face, holding her close as his chest heaved. "Stay behind me," he commanded, but his voice was heavy with fear he could not conceal. "I'm not afraid," she whispered, pressing her forehead to his. "I'm with you, always." The words were a balm and a spark. Antonio felt something shift deep within him. It was no longer just about survival. It was about claiming their life together, unshakable and undeterred by fear or enemies by the time the rival faction was subdued. Antonio and Elena were bruised but victorious. He looked at her, truly looked, seeing the fire in her eyes and the unyielding courage she carried. His hands cradled her face, tracing the line of her jaw gently, memorizing the softness that had become his anchor in a world of chaos. "You fought with me," he said quietly, his voice thick with emotion. "You risked everything, and I—" He paused, swallowing hard. "I couldn't imagine losing you." Elena's hand rested over his heart. "And you won't," she said, her voice steady, unwavering. "We survived together. That's what matters." Antonio pressed his lips to hers, slow and deliberate, a kiss that spoke of relief, love, and the promise of protection. Every scar on his body, every wound of the past, felt insignificant compared to the strength of what they had built together. The fight was over, but the bond forged in danger and trust had become unbreakable. As they held each other amidst the quiet aftermath, Antonio realized that the scars he bore were no longer symbols of pain alone. They were badges of survival, endurance, and the proof that love, real, raw, and fearless, was worth every battle fought and every fear faced. Chapter 10. Kissing the scarred King city was quiet that night, the streets bathed in a soft glow from the streetlights and the distant hum of life. Antonio and Elena stood on the balcony of his penthouse. The world stretched out before them, like a canvas of possibilities. The battles were over, the enemies defeated, and the scars both seen and unseen had led them here, to this fragile, beautiful moment. Antonio held Elena close, his hands firm, yet gentle around her waist. He could feel her heart beating against his chest, steady and warm, a rhythm that matched his own after so long spent in solitude and shadow. 4 years he had hidden behind power, fear, and control. Now, with her in his arms, he felt something he had never dared to allow: complete surrender to love. "You've changed me," he said quietly, his lips brushing against her hair. "I thought I was untouchable, unmovable. I thought my scars defined me, but you've shown me there's more to life than shadows and fear." Elena lifted her face, her eyes glimmering with emotion. "You've always been capable of love, Antonio," she said softly. "You just needed someone willing to see it, to believe in it with you." He cupped her face, his thumbs tracing the lines of her cheeks with reverence. "I don't want to hide anymore," he whispered. "I don't want to hide from you, from us." Elena smiled, tears threatening to spill, and leaned closer. "Then don't," she whispered back, her voice trembling with warmth and certainty. And then, finally, Antonio kissed her. It was slow, tender, and deliberate, a kiss that spoke of promises kept, battles endured, and love that had survived. Every test, every scar on his body felt lighter, every burden eased, as if the act of embracing her fully had healed pieces of him he had long thought lost. When they pulled back, their foreheads rested together, breath mingling, hearts beating. In unison, the world around them could wait. All that mattered was this moment, this love, and the future they would build together. Antonio smiled, a rare, genuine curve of his lips, and Elena responded with a laugh, soft and unrestrained. It was a sound that belonged to life, to joy, and to hope. He pressed his forehead to hers again, whispering, "You are my world, and you are mine," she replied, her hand over his heart. Under the quiet stars and the gentle hum of the city, they stood together, scarred yet unbroken, powerful yet tender, bound by trust, courage, and a love that had been forged in the shadows but now shone brighter than anything they had ever known. The Mafia King had found his heart, and in Elena's arms he was home.